real stories of werewolves, of dogmen from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
The Werewolf of Boggy Creek. Dear Scary Stories NYC. The first thing I noticed about the creature was the sound. Not a rustle, not a snap of a twig, but a presence that cut through the Arkansas afternoon like a knife. My boots had been crunching through the fallen leaves of Boggy Creek's dense woodland when everything, and I mean everything, went absolutely silent. That unnatural quiet that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand straight up. The kind of silence that whispers something is profoundly wrong. Then I saw him, tall, impossibly skinny, a creature that looked like a stretched-out shadow against the dense green backdrop of the forest. 6 feet of pure, lean muscle and unexpected angles, standing with a tension that suggested he was ready to explode into motion at any second. This wasn't a bear. This wasn't a person. This was something entirely other. He was facing away from me, but I could see the defined musculature of his back, the strange jointedness of his frame that suggested something not quite human, not quite animal. Skin that looked like it was stretched tight over a body engineered for survival in this unforgiving wilderness. And he was looking at something that hadn't yet revealed itself. Boggy Creek isn't just a place. It's a whispered legend that cuts through the heart of Fouke, Arkansas, a tiny town nestled in the southwestern corner of the state where wilderness still holds its secrets close. The area first burst into national consciousness in 1946 when local farmers began reporting encounters with a large, human-like creature roaming the dense forests and murky swamplands. But it was the 1972 documentary-style horror film, The Legend of Boggy Creek, that transformed these local rumors into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Directed by Charles B. Pierce, the film blended real interviews with dramatic reenactments, presenting the Boggy Creek monster, or Fouke monster, as a genuine threat lurking just beyond civilization's edge. The creature was described consistently, a large, bipedal, hair-covered humanoid standing between 6 and 7 feet tall. Witnesses spoke of a pungent, musky odor and its ability to move with surprising speed through the thick Arkansas woodland. Local folklore mixed Native American legends of forest spirits with modern cryptozoology, creating a mythos that was part scientific curiosity, part campfire horror story. Multiple sightings were reported throughout the 1960s and 1970s, with the most famous occurring near the homes of local families like the Fords, who claimed multiple encounters that formed the backbone of Pierce's legendary film. The creature became so embedded in local culture that Fouke embraced its cryptid reputation, with local businesses and tourism leaning into the mysterious legend. But standing there in that moment, watching that impossibly thin creature tensed against the forest backdrop, I wasn't thinking about movies or legends. I was witnessing something that felt utterly, terrifyingly real. That's when the forest changed. Not subtly, not with some gentle shift of wind or rustle of leaves, but with a presence that made the air itself feel thick and electric. The skinny creature I'd been watching went absolutely rigid, his entire body coiling like a spring ready to unleash. Erupting from my left came something that defied every rational explanation I'd ever known. 8 feet of pure, brutal muscle. Brown fur matted and dense, moving with a predatory grace that was part wolf, part human, part absolute nightmare. The Dogman wasn't just large, he was overwhelming. Muscled shoulders that seemed carved from living granite, a profile that mixed canine aggression with something disturbingly intelligent. Their confrontation wasn't physical. Not yet. It was a battle of pure, primal intimidation. The skinny Boggy Creek sasquatch let out a sound, part scream, part territorial declaration, that didn't belong to any creature I'd ever heard, high and keening, yet with an underlying growl that spoke of ancient territorial rage. The Dogman responded in kind, a vocalization that was part bark, part roar, that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath my feet. Two apex predators, two beings that shouldn't exist, and me, frozen, watching, barely breathing. Their bodies were positioned in a classic standoff. The Sasquatch, lean and tall, all angular tension, versus the Dogman, a wall of brown fur and raw muscular power, neither attacking, both communicating in a language of threat and counter-threat that predated human understanding. I'd heard stories, local legends whispered in dive bars and hunting camps, but this was something else entirely. The screaming was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a language of pure territorial fury that seemed to tear through the forest itself. The Dogman began to advance, and I watched the Sasquatch's confidence crumble with each thunderous step. Where moments before the creature had stood defiant, now his body language screamed desperation. His lean frame began to retreat incrementally, those long limbs no longer coiled with confidence, but trembling with a primal fear that was unmistakable. Their vocalizations weren't just sounds, they were weapons. The Dogman's roar was a deep, guttural challenge that seemed to shake pine needles from branches. It was a sound of absolute dominance, the kind of vocalization that declares ownership of territory, of survival itself. In response, the Sasquatch's screams became higher, more desperate, no longer a challenge but a plea, a warning, a submission. I could see the moment the battle turned. The Sasquatch's shoulders dropped, his head tilted slightly, not in aggression but in pure survival instinct. He was calculating escape routes, measuring the impossible distance between himself and safety. The Dogman knew it too. He took another step forward, and the forest seemed to contract around his massive form, fur rippling with muscle, eyes locked with predatory intensity on the now retreating Sasquatch. This wasn't just a territorial dispute. This was a fundamental challenge to existence itself, and the Dogman was winning. Each moment felt like an eternity. The Sasquatch's movements became more erratic, more panicked. His earlier confidence had completely dissolved, replaced by a raw, animal terror that was painful to witness. He was about to be overwhelmed, about to be crushed by this larger, more brutal creature. Just when it seemed the Dogman would deliver a final, devastating blow, to claim absolute victory in this primal territorial dispute, everything changed. Some moments are so extraordinary that your brain struggles to process them. This was one of those moments. The forest erupted with a sound that was part scream, part war cry. Another Sasquatch burst into the clearing, moving with a speed that defied its size. This one matched the first in height, 6 feet of pure, muscled determination. But where the first had been all nervous energy, this newcomer radiated pure, focused rage. It wasn't a rescue, it was an assault. The two Sasquatches moved with a synchronicity that suggested something deeper than mere coincidence. Years of shared territory, of understood communication that ran far beneath any human comprehension. In an instant, they transformed from potential competitors to a unified force. The Dogman, that massive, brown-furred nightmare, suddenly found himself outnumbered. His confidence, so absolute moments before, fractured. The predator became the prey in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The Sasquatch's coordinated attack was brutal in its efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation. They drove forward, matching the Dogman's earlier intimidation with their own overwhelming presence. Screams that were part challenge, part celebration echoed through the trees. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. And then they were gone. The Dogman, fleeing, no longer the dominant force, vanished into the dense Arkansas woodland, pursued by two creatures that had moments before seemed completely outmatched. I stood frozen, breathing, wondering if what I'd just witnessed was real. The walk home was surreal. My legs moved automatically, but my mind was still back there in that clearing, replaying every impossible second of what I'd just witnessed. Some experiences are so far beyond rational explanation that your brain struggles to even process them. This was one of those moments. I kept looking over my shoulder, not out of fear exactly, more out of a desperate need to confirm that what I'd seen was real. The forest behind me remained silent, holding its secrets close. Boggy Creek had always been a place of legends, local stories whispered around campfires, dismissed by most as folklore. But folklore doesn't leave footprints. Folklore doesn't make the air itself feel charged with something ancient and inexplicable. What struck me most wasn't the violence, or the near violence of the encounter. It was the communication. Those creatures weren't just fighting. They were negotiating, territorial, complex. A language so far beyond human understanding that calling it a language felt inadequate. Two sasquatches, working together, driving out an intruder. By the time I reached the edge of the woods, the afternoon light was changing, casting long shadows that seemed to move with more intention than mere sunlight should. I knew with absolute certainty that no one would believe me, and perhaps that was exactly as it should be. Some stories are meant to remain just beyond the edge of understanding.
Beauty and the Beast Man. Dear Scary Stories NYC. They say time heals all wounds, but some wounds simply transform into something else entirely. Something that sits in your chest like a stone, smooth from years of turning it over in your mind. I've carried mine for 25 years now, ever since Sarah disappeared. And lately I've been questioning everything I thought I knew about loss and reality. I don't know why I never moved away from Millbrook after it happened. Everyone expected me to. My parents, her parents, even Sheriff Mackenzie suggested a fresh start might do me good. But leaving felt like giving up, like admitting she was truly gone. So I stayed, took the night shift at the paper mill, and kept walking these woods like a man trapped in the gravity of an old grief. The mill whistle marks the end of each shift at 11:30 p.m., its lonely sound echoing through the valley. Most folks take their cars home or catch rides with coworkers, but not me. I walk home through Black Ridge Woods, the same woods that swallowed Sarah all those years ago. People ask why I still take that route, especially at night. I tell them it's shorter. I don't tell them about the comfort I feel in these familiar shadows, how every tree feels like a sentinel keeping watch over memories I can't bear to lose. But 3 weeks ago something changed. The autumn fog was rolling in thick that night, the kind that turns trees into looming figures and makes you question your own eyes. I was about halfway through my usual path through the woods when I saw them. At first I thought it was just another trick of moonlight on mist, but then the fog parted like a curtain, and there they stood, a massive silver-furred creature, easily 8 feet tall, with pointed ears that twitched at every sound of the night. Its eyes glowed amber in the darkness, but it wasn't those eyes that stopped my heart. It was the young woman that the creature was cradling in its arms. She couldn't have been more than 22. That was Sarah's age when she vanished. Her blonde hair caught what little moonlight filtered through the canopy, creating a halo effect I'd seen 1,000 times in my dreams. For a moment, time collapsed. My mind refused to accept that Sarah would be 47 now, that this couldn't possibly be her. But the resemblance was uncanny. That night, the October fog rolled in thick as smoke. You know the kind. The sort that turns familiar things strange and makes you doubt what's real. The moon was nearly full that night, hanging low and yellow through the mist. The way it filtered through the trees created these shifting columns of light, like nature's own spotlight display. I was approaching the creek crossing when I saw them. At first I thought they were just another trick of light and shadow. God knows these woods play enough of those games with a lonely mind. But when that fog parted and there they stood in one of those moonlight spotlights, I thought I was looking at actors on a stage. That creature was, well, magnificent isn't the right word. Terrifying comes closer, but even that doesn't capture it. Silver fur that seemed to absorb and reflect the moonlight, making it look almost ethereal. It stood upright with a build that reminded me of those old werewolf movies, but more elegant somehow. Its ears were pointed and alert, swiveling at every snap of twig or rustle of leaf. But it was its eyes that held me frozen, amber and glowing with an intelligence that felt ancient and wild. And in its arms, even now my hands shake thinking about it, a young woman around the age of 22, her blonde hair catching the moonlight just like Sarah's used to. All I could see was how she tilted her head the same way as Sarah, how her hands rested with that same delicate grace as Sarah. The similarities sent me tumbling back through time. Spring of 1999. We were a week from our wedding. Sarah went for her morning run, 6 miles through these same woods, a route she'd taken hundreds of times before. By noon, when she hadn't shown up for lunch with her mom, we knew something was wrong. By sunset, half the town was searching these woods. I can still hear the crunch of leaves under dozens of late 20th century boots, see the bobbing beams of flashlights cutting through darkness. They found her blue windbreaker first, a piece of it anyway, snagged on a branch near Cedar Creek. Then one of her running shoes, laces still tied, sitting perfectly placed on a flat rock like some kind of a sign. The dogs lost her scent at the water's edge, as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. Sheriff Mackenzie pulled me aside after the 3rd week of searching. I'd never seen the old man look so uncomfortable in his uniform. "Son," he said, looking everywhere but at me, "sometimes these woods, they take people." Been happening longer than anyone likes to admit. I thought he was just trying to give me some kind of closure. Now I wonder if he knew more than he was saying. 2 weeks after my first sighting, I saw them again. I'd taken to walking slower through the woods, eyes searching every shadow. This time they were by the old quarry pond, where the moonlight reflects off the water like broken glass. I was closer, close enough to see details that still haunt me. The creature wasn't restraining the woman. It was cradling her, the way you'd hold something precious and fragile. She seemed perfectly at peace, one hand resting on its massive forearm, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. I took a step closer, drawn by some magnetic need to understand. My foot blindly found a dead branch, and the crack was like a gunshot in the night silence. The creature's head snapped toward me, eyes flaring brighter. It turned with impossible grace, shielding the woman with its body. Before they vanished into the shadows, I swear I saw her look back at me, with something in her eyes. Was it recognition? That's when my obsession really took hold. I spent every free moment in the library's local history section. The deeper I dug, the more strange information I found. Native American stories went back very far. Tales of forest guardians who sometimes took special souls into their protection. Each account added another piece to a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. Last night I stayed late at work deliberately. The moon was almost full again, the fog thin enough to see clearly. I followed the path to the old oak. Our oak, where Sarah and I used to meet in high school. That's where I saw them one more time. The creature stood in a perfect shaft of moonlight, its silver fur almost luminescent. The young woman was standing this time, one hand resting on the creature's arm. She turned and I swore she looked directly at me, and the resemblance to Sarah's photo, the one still sitting on my bedside table, hit me like a physical blow. That same gentle curve of her cheek, the same slight tilt of her head, even the way her hair fell across her forehead. For the first time I could swear she was smiling at me. Not a stranger's smile, but something deeper, something that spoke of secrets and shared memories. The creature made a noise, a growling sound that vibrated in my chest and sent me stumbling backward. When I gained my balance and looked up again, they were gone, leaving only disturbed leaves and questions that keep me awake at night. I've found a strange peace in these encounters, although I couldn't tell you why. Maybe some mysteries are not meant to be solved, just witnessed. Maybe life and love don't always follow the rules we think they should. I don't know if that young woman has any connection to Sarah, or if I'm seeing patterns in chaos because my heart needs to find meaning in its loss. What I do know is that I'll keep walking this path through the woods, even knowing what might be watching from the shadows. Because sometimes the possibility of understanding is worth the risk. And sometimes love stories don't end. They just change shape, like shadows in the fog, like memories in the dark, like wounds that transform into something else entirely.
It's a classic rollover, play with the scary stories, got it. It's a classic rollover, put it in a stand or go to local. Available in white, black, navy, gray or pink. Link is in the description.
Well, here's good news. Just have a look. Our newest channel member is Jerome Cook. Please join me in welcoming our newest $3 channel member, Jerome Cook, who got to see our all-new secret members-only episode yesterday, which is entitled, I Punched Wolfman in the Nards. It's actually a story of someone who headbutted a wolfman in the Nards, but that was too long to fit on the title card. If you're a channel member, then you should have seen the notice on our members perks page, and if you're a member of our PayPal subscribers club, then you should hopefully have received a notice in your email. In either case, I think it was the first time I've read a new story this year myself, and this episode right here is the second. I just haven't been well enough to do it, as I was suffering from one thing or another since the end of last year. I would get over an illness, and then I'd get an injury, and it kept getting impossible to do my ordinary work. I was forced to get innovative with how I got shows done, and I'd like to keep some of those ideas going, like the short Dogman films. But I'm also very happy to be getting back to doing some reads of my own again. With ad rates disappearing, we couldn't have made it this far without channel members like Jerome. And we're going to need more heroic people like him to stay afloat as the year progresses. Here to explain more about all that is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.